Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Current Affairs Unfiltered. I'm your host, Paige Fullman. This week, we are sitting down with a social media personality, not necessarily an influencer, but somebody who I once again stumbled on my For You page. And he's always made kind of political, satirical videos, and they've popped up on my For You page before, but I saw a video of his that went, I don't want to say viral, but, it went a little bit beyond the reaches of politically satirical content. And I really liked what he had to say. I was very interested in his take, and it made me want to speak to him even more. And so I reached out to ask if he would come on to talk about the video and expand on his thoughts a little bit. And what his video basically said was the Republican Party is broken, and he's saying that as a Republican. So today we're going to be talking about what do we do? What is it like to be a person who is a Republican who has watched this rise of Trump and never really subscribed to it? I think he is one of many and part of probably a not very vocal subset of the population. And people like him need to have their voices shared because their stories are important to say, hey, it's normal to change your ideas. And that works in the reverse too. It's normal to be a Democrat or a leftist and start to lean the other way as you learn more information. Both things are acceptable. So I wanted to get that kind of perspective. So today we are having on Hot Takes. You can find Hot Takes on all socials under the username hot_takes10. Hot Takes is a news and politics junkie who treats every election year like a nonstop sporting event. Hot Takes is a registered Republican who feels like the party has abandoned him. For years, he's been a never-Trumper who loves to make comedic and satirical videos about the administration in hopes it will get people to realize the hypocrisy in supporting Trump. He hopes that one day the Republican Party can eventually find its way and manage to get back to normalcy. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Hot Takes. Hot Takes, thank you very much for coming on. It is great to have you.
It's good to be here. I'm excited.
So let's start out. Who are you? What's your kind of political shtick? What do you do in the political commentary space?
Yeah, so I originally started out on Twitter or X or whoever.
We call it Twitter in this house.
However you want to call it. Elon's social media website.
Okay.
So I started out there, and my whole thought process was kind of just political memes and satire and just kind of being goofy online. And that's since then kind of expanded to all the different social media networks, YouTube, TikTok, Threads, Blue Sky. I mean, you name it at this point. I think the only one I'm not on is Facebook, just because I feel like I've got too many. But what I like to kind of do is just make kind of satirical videos, mostly poking fun at politics, sometimes current events, that, just to kind of get some laughs and some hate. I've been getting I've gotten some interesting comments.
You and me both.
That's going to happen when you're talking politics. But yeah, so I try to make most of it, kind of lighthearted commentary, just poking fun at some things. Sometimes I'll do some skits. Other times it's just kind of like meme videos where I'll splice together some things like that. So it's mostly just kind of getting involved in politics, but in a way that's not just like, well, let me get in the weeds and get really boring all the time, like something with a little bit of lightheartedness and levity, which I guess depending on what side of the aisle you're on, you may find that lighthearted or not. I don't know.
Right. Well, and so that's how I found you. I found you on my TikTok For You page where you had posted a TikTok that I was very intrigued by. You introduced yourself as a Republican who didn't support Trump. And I'm always very interested to speak to people like that because you don't get a lot of people saying that out loud and proud on the internet. And
it was dangerous.
Right. And one thing you said in that video, you were responding to somebody who had said that you were brainwashed. And what you had said was, yeah, I was brainwashed against Trump by his own words. And not in the sense of you supporting him at all. But can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah. So one of the most common comments that I will get under any of my videos is that, oh, I'm just another brainwashed leftist. And I'm like, well, actually, I'm not a leftist at all, but, thanks for playing. And yeah, after about the 10,000th comment like that, I finally was like, you know what, I'm going to make a video and kind of explain, what's going on. And so the point behind that is everybody on the right just assumes that if you're not a Republican, it's because you've been brainwashed by the education system, by college, by you name it, right? Like anything to explain why you're not a Republican, you have been brainwashed by that. And so, for me and the journey that I kind of went with is I was a Republican my entire life. I grew up on Fox News. Both my parents are hardcore Trump supporters. Both sides of my family, Trump supporters. In college, I voted for McCain and then Romney. And so it's not like I was this closeted liberal that, I got into college and it unleashed the progressive side of me. It was like the complete opposite, right? Like at one point I remember walking around and there was the young Democrats. One of their people came up to me like, hey, would you like to join? I was like, no, guy, I'm a Republican, back off. And he
Nice
apologized. Yeah, he really did say, I'm sorry. And I was like, okay. So that's kind of where I was at. And then, Trump comes on the political stage and, in the beginning, like we're talking coming down the escalator, from the very beginning, he comes in hot and heavy with the immigrants or race or rapists and whatnot. And even at that point, I was like, well, he's not a politician. He stuck his foot in his mouth, whatever. And it just kind of continued, debate after debate, interview after interview. The guy just was really kind of showing himself. And it was this new way of speaking that I was like, either he's really smart and he's reaching a group of people that is forgotten, or he's just a really terrible person. And it took me a bit, but I finally started to kind of come to the conclusion that I think he's just a really terrible person. And watching every Republican that I knew eat it up, or if they didn't eat it up, they were at least excusing it and going like, yeah, well, could be worse. We could have that woman over there, and it's like, okay, like I get it. She's not the best candidate either, but this guy, like Trump, the way he's acted, it was like no decorum, no professionalism, nothing, no respect, it seemed like, for the moment or the office. And I to this day don't even think he believed he was ever going to win. So he just kind of went out there. It was like a marketing campaign for him. He was going to get all kinds of publicity, and then oops, you did too good of a job.
Oops, I'm the president.
Yeah, oops, you're the president now. And it was like, well, that worked. I guess I'll just keep doing it. And so at that point, I just looked at it and I was like, I can't support it, right? Like it's not the narrative that the news is pushing. It's not, people telling me to think one way or the other. It was literally just me watching him talk. And I was like, I don't know how you explain this away, right? Like just the way he goes about it, the off the cuff stuff that he would say. It's like, that's just him being him. And if that's him being him, what is that going to show for his policies, who he's going to hire around him, things like that. So when I say I was brainwashed by Trump, he kind of pushed me the opposite way of where I've been my entire life, because I realized, like, if this is what the Republican Party is at this point, that's not where I'm at.
Right. And that's, like I said, like not a story that a lot of people are screaming from the rooftops, but you're not the first Republican I've spoken to that has said in that 2015, 2016 period, they were looking around going, is this who we are now? Like, is this what it is? Like, is this what it's going to be?
Yeah, it was a weird time. And, at least back then people were like, well, he's not the greatest, but whereas like now I feel like it's full steam ahead. Nothing he says or does is wrong.
Because you can't say that it's wrong without
absolutely
maybe being arrested.
Yeah, arrested or just completely tarred and feathered, I guess. And, it's just such a wild evolution over the last 10 years that even now, like I say I'm a Republican, but it's like, am I anymore? Like, yeah, that's my registration, but does it
Right.
count still? Like,
Right. Well, that's what there's a few Republicans in my circle that have been like, oh, like, I can't believe I'm going to vote for a Democrat in the midterms. And I'm like, well, don't know what to tell you because the options are Antichrist or someone who's not the Antichrist. Like, that's what we got. That's what we're dealing with.
yeah, and that's kind of how I felt. Like in the beginning, it felt almost like dirty. Like I was doing the wrong thing, voting against the Republican
Right.
Party. And I remember, so in 2016, I just voted third party. I voted, I can't remember his name, Johnson, I think's who it was,
Yes.
who equally just as he was a dumb candidate. I don't even know why he ran. But at that point, I was like, well, I'm not quite yet ready to vote Democrat. So I'll go, just in the middle. By 2020, I was like, whatever we got to do, man. Like, what do we have to do? Yes, a napkin. I'll vote for a napkin at this point. And I remember after the election, my mom sent me a text and said, if you voted for Biden, please pray for your soul. And I was like, okay, thanks,
Yeah.
Mom. Like,
Yeah. Well, that's in that same vein. When Joe Biden was still running in the 2024 election, my mom, who has always been pretty much an independent, like, and I truly mean that. Prior to 2016, she'd vote for whoever she thought the best candidate was. As Joe Biden was like clearly not meant to be in this race anymore, my mom was like, I don't care if they have to prop him up. Like, I'm not, if they need to like hold him up with the like puppet strings, like
Weekend at Bernie's. Yeah,
exactly. Like, I'm still voting for him. I can't go any other way at this point.
Yeah, it's like you look back at the 2024 election, and it's really unfortunate how the Democrats just really fumbled that. I mean, there should have been no reason Trump won that election.
Right.
But, they waited for him for Biden to get out of the race too late. And then Harris comes in and, it was obvious that Biden was unpopular at the time and she just wouldn't distance herself whatsoever, which I get it. It's a hard situation to be in being the vice president, but
right.
She needed to do a little bit more. And as a result, here we are, 2025. And
right.
We've got Trump again.
Right. Don't remind me.
Yeah.
But we talked a little bit about the rhetoric, but beyond the rhetoric, what was the most jarring to you in his first run that made you start to question, is this really what it is now?
It was like I said, the decorum, if anything. He could just go out there and lie straight to your face and not blink. And I get it. Politicians lie. That's not new, right? Every single politician's ever run lies. But it was like you got the Access Hollywood tape, right? And then it was like, oh, that didn't happen. And then everybody's like, oh, okay, yeah, it didn't happen. And like you literally caught him on tape. Nope, didn't happen. Right. And it's like how the Republican Party that sits there and prides itself on family values, evangelical Christians in a lot of cases are a big population of that party. And you've got this dude that's cheated on every wife he's ever had, literally been with porn stars and Playboy models and obviously on tape talking about sexual assault. And they're like, well, that happens. And so it's like, how can we allow that? So it was a combination of him, and then it was a combination of the response to him that really just kind of worried me. It was like, if people are that easily swayed, then what else could they be swayed by? And do I want to be a part of that? Because I could have just as easily been like, well, he's got an R next to his name, so yeah, I'll just do what everybody else is doing. And but that's what really kind of troubled me, is it's like, no matter what happened, everybody was like, no, that's great, that's fine. As long as he comes in here and does what I want him to do, I don't care what he's done in his personal life. And that's really just kind of been the mantra that's continued to, keep going. And it's, I don't know, that's what kind of really pushed me over, between his rhetoric, between how everybody acted towards him. It was like, I just can't.
Well, right. And when I think about the difference between Trump 1 and Trump 2, I think about how in Trump 1, there was a very vocal, like, corporate resistance that
Hmm.
we just, like, it was seen as a bad thing to be donating to Trump and be, seen
Yeah.
meeting with him at the White House. Whereas now you see, Mark Zuckerberg or whatever CEO it is going over there, and you're like, oh, like they're capitulating.
Yeah, it's fear. I think it's
Right.
absolutely fear because
Absolutely.
you're talking about people that at no point in their history have they ever been donating to the Republican Party, have they been vocalizing Republican values, and then all of a sudden Trump comes in and they all in unison were like, well, we don't want to get sued. We don't want to get, our mergers and acquisitions broken up.
Right.
We want our money. And in corporate America, we all know what talks the most, and that's your dollars. And, Mark Zuckerberg still needs to build his bunker out in Hawaii. So he doesn't want any of that to be, taken away.
Right. Right. So you touched on it a little bit about your political identity and how it's kind of evolved, but
Mhm.
from 2016 to now, how would you consider that evolution of your political identity to be? Do you still feel like you're politically homeless, so to speak, or do you feel like
Uh,
you're kind of finding your niche and your people?
Yeah, I mean, I would say uh, since the 2016 election, I have definitely become more progressive, and I think a lot of that just kind of has to do with I've seen how in a lot of cases on the right, and I'm not going to characterize everybody on the right this way, so I don't want that to get misconstrued, but I've seen a lot of instances where they just don't seem to care. There's no care, right? It's like, oh, well, you're poor, just work harder. Oh, you don't have health care. Well, get a job. Oh, you don't have this. Oh, well, that's because you suck. It's like I've kind of taken a step back and realized, like, yeah, Democrats may not have it all figured out, but at least on the face value of it, they seem to be attempting to make life better for certain people. Now, whether or not they always go about it correctly, no. But at the end of the day, do you want to try to make things better, or do you just want to keep saying, well, trickle down economics is going to work this time? And Reagan figured it out, so we're going to keep trying it. And so, I would definitely say now I would vote Democrat a little bit more freely than I would have in 2016 because I've kind of started to see that, like, I would rather be on the side that's trying to help people a little bit more and that's, not so hard-hearted towards people's situations, because at the end of the day, you could be that person at any given moment,
Right.
and you might need to use that assistance one day. And, if you keep voting against that stuff, then you could just as easily find yourself in a hole. I've definitely started to lean more liberal over the years. Now, it's not to say that there's, things that I don't still somewhat disagree with or that I'm trying to come to terms with, but yeah, I don't think the Republican Party is quite there anymore.
Right. Well, had but I do an introductory call with all the guests that I
Mhm.
have on, and I was doing an introductory call with somebody running for office who, not going to name names because this made me laugh out loud, and she goes, "The Republican Party needs to be burnt down and raised up again on the bones of John McCain." I was like, "You know what? Sing it, sister. I'm not going to quote you on that, but
Yeah,
that's a good one."
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy to see. It wasn't that long ago, right? It's not like this was a 50-year evolution. I mean, we're talking two presidents ago. Really,
Right.
it's just wild to me that things have turned so drastically.
Right. So going back to two presidents ago and, kind of how that gave way to Trump kind of coming to be, um, on his rhetoric, people think it's divisive. Don't think that's an unpopular opinion to have. But for people that are in the quote unquote forgotten right, it sounds like somebody is finally speaking directly to them. Why do you think Trump's rhetoric resonates so deeply with people in that group?
Well, I think a lot of the forgotten right. Again, I'm not going to characterize everybody on the right this way, but there's a lot of people within that party that, they're, I don't even want to go geographically. There, there's a lot of people that still, prescribe to those old values that you would have seen back in the day. And they know that now they can't really get away with some of the stuff that their grandparents would have said, and it's not always racist, but sometimes it's just not politically correct. And, I think they felt like they were being boxed in all the time. You can't say certain words anymore that you could have said as recently as the early 2000s, for example, all of a sudden you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't say this, you can't, and Trump comes in and just blows the doors off and goes, I don't care, I'll say it, and so
Right.
they finally were like, well, here's a guy that gets it. Like, I shouldn't be told what to say or, how to view someone else. He kind of just came in like a wrecking ball and didn't tiptoe around anything. And I think they looked at that and went, that's what I want, because that's what I've been, but I have to be it quietly. And that is what I think really propelled him. And again, I don't want to go geographically or, say that it's the entire party, but just look at an electoral map and you'll see where the majority of the red states are. And I don't think you'd have to jump to too many conclusions to kind of see what I'm talking about. And,
Right.
there's always some outliers. There's going to be people that, for economic reasons, they just are always going to vote somebody that is going to be better for business and things like that. And, he's definitely run on a pro-business platform for years, even though he's gone bankrupt like 3 million times, but people don't care. He
Right.
talks like them and acts like them, even though he would never be caught dead with them. And that's what's important to them, is they feel like they can be who they want to be, loud and proud.
Right. Right. So I remember back in the 2016 election, and I was too young to vote, but I was in high school, and I went to a wealthier private Jesuit high school. So lots of white people, lots of, like I said, wealthy people.
Private
And
Catholic high school. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
Exactly. But in the run up to the 2016 election, and again, keep in mind, none of us could vote except maybe a few of the seniors in the 2016 election. Seeing the change in rhetoric from children who could not vote in the election is, to me, like what radicalized me, where I was like, I'm sorry, did we forget what the Jesuits stand for? Like, you're coming to school and you're like saying screw the immigrants? Like, what is happening? Like that.
They're hearing that at home more than likely. And
exactly.
now it's okay.
And feeling emboldened to then recreate that. And that was always the part that I was the most disgusted by, was that it gave people, like you've just been saying, like the okay to publicly say these mean and nasty things. Whereas like prior to that, when somebody would say things like that, you could and should have shunned them societally, and like that was acceptable. No longer.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. I think there are some instances where things have probably gone a little too far, which has really kind of pushed people like Trump into more prominence, right? Because when you start taking everything to the max, then people are going to, like I said, they feel so boxed in that they look for that escape, and Trump was that release valve. And so, that's where I think in our earlier conversation, I kind of said that the Democrats kind of own some of this. And that's kind of what I mean. Like, and not just the Democratic Party, but just like liberal society in general. We talked about corporations, before, wanted to really distance themselves from Trump. Like, it was kind of the same thing pre-Trump too. Like, they would just really be politically correct on absolutely everything. And I think that drove some people so insane that when Trump comes on stage and was like, yeah, screw the immigrants, or, we're going to say this, that, and the other, they were like, oh, okay, we can do that now. We can go back to that way of life. Okay, let's vote him in.
Right. Well, it's the same thing you see now where you see like which company posts Happy Indigenous Peoples Day and which company posts
Yeah.
Happy Columbus Day. You can see just, point blank who's trying to not get sued, like,
Yeah.
and who's still kind of sticking by what they want to stick by. Anyways, still sticking on the kind of grievances that MAGA Republicans have. What are those grievances that Trump has tapped into that traditional politics tends to ignore? We talked a little bit about the geographical aspect, but is there anything else?
Well, I mean, obviously from the very minute he stepped on the political stage, immigration was a big policy for his, and that has been something that has scared the Republican Party for since I can remember. Like, I'm in my late 30s at this point. I don't remember a time in which the Republican Party wasn't worried about people from Mexico coming and taking our jobs. And whether or not that's true or not, it is the narrative, and he knew that. And so he came in immediately, despite the fact that he had immigrant housekeepers and people working at his country club that were undocumented. Who cares about all that? We got to get the votes. And so come in and say what you want about immigrants or immigration. And then you got the economy, which or not necessarily economy, but healthcare, which at the time, Obamacare was still a very divisive policy and program. And even though it's helped millions of people, and there's a lot of people even on the right that benefit from it, he knew that it was a divisive program, and he came in and he kept talking about how they were going to fix it and dismantle it, and never did, because they can't come up with their own version of healthcare that it makes any sense. But so he knew the buttons to press, and it was these topics that seem like they affect everyone, and whether or not they do is always a different topic. But it's the scary things like, oh, your health care is going to go way up. Oh, an immigrant's going to come in and commit a crime against you or take your job. Oh, we're housing immigrants while you can't buy a home. Well, that sucks for you. It's always that scary rhetoric. And, it's not unique to the Republican Party by any means, but they really like to ratchet it up to 11 in a lot of cases. And so he just tapped into a part in the Republican Party that was always a fear, and then he made it even bigger, and was going to sell them the solution with a big wall, because big walls are easy to visualize, right? Nuanced policy is hard to sell because your average everyday person doesn't care, doesn't know, doesn't understand. But you know what they do understand? A wall. Everyone knows what a wall looks like, and Trump came down and dumbed it up as much as he could, because I think that's about as smart as he gets. And he sold people on it.
That's one thing that, not to give that man credit for anything, because I don't like that man, but that is one thing I will always give him credit for, is his ability to simplify policy into these, like, chantable bits. Build the wall has been chanted at his rallies for a decade. Lock her up has been chanted at his rallies for a decade. He is so easily able to convert what should be a complex and nuanced political policy discussion into something so bite-sized and digestible.
Oh, absolutely.
And that is something that the Democrats, I just don't think they can do.
They absolutely struggle with that. I mean, you look at any debate and you've got the Democrats trying to explain how a policy is going to work. And it's like, your average person watching this doesn't understand. They don't know, or they don't care. Maybe it's not that they don't understand. They don't care the minute details, because they know, just based on past experience, that that's not even necessarily how it's going to end up, right? It's not going to work that way. That you can't unilaterally do that as a president in most cases. Trump just comes in and goes, well, we're going to make things cheaper. And, and then all of a sudden people are like, I like cheaper. Oh, gas under $2? Yeah, I can get behind that. Doesn't explain any way how any of that's going to happen, but because he proclaimed it, people believe him. And
right,
that's his secret power, is he just can say whatever he wants, and he's got enough people that believe it that they're going to back him up on it.
Right. Well, and it doesn't even matter that he like doesn't know. Don't you remember in the Kamala and Trump debate where he goes, "I have concepts of a plan," and
Oh
nobody
yeah,
bat an
exactly.
eye.
Yeah. Well,
He admitted he had no plan whatsoever. Like,
yeah.
nobody
Well, he's
cared.
playing 4-dimensional chess, so you don't need hardcore plans. You just need concepts, and then the rest will work itself
Exactly.
out. Yeah.
Exactly. So again, on his rhetoric, do you, and I also have my own opinion about this, do you see his same kind of style of rhetoric moving beyond just the walls of Mar-a-Lago or
Yet,
and into other politicians, or is this something that is so unique to Trump?
well, I think the short answer is yes. I think that it's going to have a little bit of a lasting effect beyond just him. But I think it will dissipate over time, because immediately, let's say in 2028, right? Let's assume that he's not somehow found a way to run again. Uh, you're going to still have like JD Vance, right? He is going to try really hard to just, go right behind Trump and go off that same playbook. If it's not JD Vance, I think Don Jr. will do it. I think he could come in, and if Don Jr. comes in and starts playing the same playbook, that could push it even further. But I think as time goes on, none of them have the same personality that Trump does. And so it will fade over time, but you might still get a 2028 victory, maybe even a 2032 victory off of that. But I think once you're 1 to 2 presidencies out, you're going to start to see a whole new generation come in that didn't grow up in that, right? Like
Right.
they're going to start making different changes.
Right. Well, that's my take, is that Trump is an enigma. Like I don't think people vote for him because I think there is a sect of people that vote for him because he is a Republican, but people like him because he is Trump.
Yeah.
If JD Vance tries to come in behind him, JD Vance is kind of like a wet towel to me. Like, he does not have that same charisma, and like, it's unnatural to him, not to mention his history of being anti-Trump, and
he's a chameleon.
exactly.
Whoever he's around at the time is who he's going to be.
Right. Right. So I agree. People will try to emulate it, but it's hard to imagine in my head somebody fully being able to take the reins of MAGA, a movement literally named after Donald Trump's slogan, and take it to like its next victory using all of the same kind of rhetoric and
Ron DeSantis is a perfect example of this. Ron DeSantis does not have he does not have the same charisma that Trump does, but he's tried really hard to be Trump light. And I mean, now nobody really talks about Ron DeSantis anymore. I mean, he kind of pops up every once in a while in the news, but he's not nearly he never will be the figure that Trump is. And I think you're going to see that. You're not going to have JD Vance stores popping up in Missouri and Oklahoma, like that. They're not going to become tourist destinations.
Right.
Vance Burger is not going to be a thing. Like it's just Trump is the brand. He knows how to do that. That's what he's built his entire business strategy off of. And once he's gone, and it may take until he's literally gone for it to happen, but it will eventually dissipate.
Right. Right. So you briefly mentioned in one of your other answers that the left does share some kind of responsibility for Trump's rise. Do you think that Democratic messaging and or strategy helped kind of open the door for Trump and MAGA?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I mentioned it earlier, talking about the whole extreme political correctness. And look, I'm not going to say that in theory, the level of political correctness maybe isn't morally right. Like, we should all be treating people with respect and dignity and all of that. Absolutely. But I think it got to the point where you're canceled over everything. And as a result, that really turned people away, feeling like they just couldn't even talk as a normal human being anymore without their words from 15 years ago being parsed and looked at, and then all of a sudden they've lost their job. And so I think things like that really played a role. I think that when Obama got elected, it galvanized the party so much in the sense that they felt like, at least in those first 2 years, that they had just control of the world. And so, like the Affordable Care Act, when they were trying to pass that bill, it was a very divisive bill. It did not have necessarily the support that it does today. And you got Nancy Pelosi standing up there going, well, if you want to read the bill, you got to pass the bill. Well, that's not exactly the best messaging. And so I think that forcefulness, right or wrong, long term, was not good politically. And I think that made a lot of Republicans angry. And, you had the whole Tea Party movement kind of pulling up at that same time, which was like the early stages of MAGA, is like MAGA 1.0. And,
although never forget that Adam Kinzinger was part of that Tea Party movement, and he peeled off real quick.
Yeah, well, yeah, you had quite a few people that ended up being like, whoa, hold on. Maybe we took this a little too far.
That hard. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I didn't mean it that much.
Yeah. Once they started handing out the tiki torches and telling them to go march, they were like, oh, okay, maybe not.
Right.
So, I think those are two of the biggest things in my mind that played such a huge role, because it was a cultural and societal effect where, you had people on the right that just felt like they didn't have a voice anymore. Well, the Democrats control everything. I mean, you still hear that rhetoric today, even though, this is what always blows my mind, is there's this deep state ideology that the Democrats and this like liberal Illuminati are controlling everything behind the scenes. So in one breath, they're talking about how liberals control everything and we have to fight the deep state. And then the other breath, they're talking about how liberals are so dumb that they can't figure out how to do anything. And it's like, well, which one is it? Are they so dumb that they can't tie their shoes? Or are they so smart that they've taken over the world and you don't even know that they've taken over the world?
Well, it was the same with Joe Biden when they were calling him old and senile, which granted he was,
yes.
But then in the same breath being like, he's a criminal mastermind.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, well, he can't.
The head of the Biden crime family.
Well,
yeah.
I'm like, it simply cannot be both. Like, I don't know what to tell you about that.
Right. And even today, I just don't understand that logic when I still get people talking about how, well, the liberals, they're brainwashing our kids through the universities and the media. And I'm like, well, how did they get to that level of like prominence if they're so stupid?
Right.
You got to figure out your narrative there.
Right. No, absolutely. So what do you think that the left and Democrats still just frankly don't understand about people who feel pulled toward Trump?
I think they need to figure out, or rather they need to understand the issues that people at the end of the day truly do care about, right? And so much of their messaging for so long on both sides, really, but you like, for example, you had the abortion issue, right? That was a talking point on the right for so long. And the Democrats, they never really said anything about it unless it was in response to what the Republicans were bringing up. And they just kind of ignored it, that was this groundswell, at least on the Republican Party. So there was no really defending it. It was just like, well, that's law. So, get over it.
Right.
And now come to find out, well, it wasn't settled law, because when you stack the courts, you can have anything you want. And so, I look at it today and the topics of today. I think the Democratic Party focused a little too heavily on things like transgender rights. And again, I'm not saying that they shouldn't focus on that, but it became this topic in which Republicans were able to then constantly be like, well, you don't even know what dressing room you should be in, or, oh, you can't explain what a woman is. And it's like, for most people in middle America, for lack of a better term, they agree with that. And whether that's right or wrong or indifferent, you got to find a different way to package the messaging. than telling them that they're evil people for not believing the way that you do in acknowledging pronouns and things like that. Like,
Right.
again, right or wrong, that's a whole separate debate. But for the Democrats, they've got to package that differently because they're losing that debate.
It's
Go
go
ahead.
on.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say it's your take is interesting because to me, I think the transgender, like I think that was manufactured by Trump and Republicans, and I think Democrats unfortunately took the bait because what we just talked about, a lot of what Trump and Republicans were saying about transgender people was a lot of fear mongering, to be quite frank with
Absolutely.
you, in my opinion. And
Well, they stopped
it's
fear
not
mongering about the gays, and so they had to go to
right,
something else.
Exactly. They had to take it another step further.
Yeah.
And I feel like the best response would have been no response, but a worse response than what they did would have just been saying, like, you're lying and not, like, saying anything else after that. So I think it was bait, and Democrats unfortunately took it. And you're right, it is a losing issue. And I've spoken to a lot of candidates that are running in rural areas and will say voters come up to me and they are legitimately concerned about transgender issues. And one of the candidates was like, and I often say to them, do you know, have you seen a transgender person in your in a bathroom here in your rural county? And they're like, well, no, but it's a problem. Like, so it's a lot of things, but I think Democrats should have just shut up about it. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
And that's not to say not to be a bad liberal. I'm not saying trans people don't matter. They obviously do. They deserve protection. But
absolutely,
I wish Democrats would have just shut the hell up about it.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of come at it with, it's not that they shouldn't necessarily talk about it, because it kind of goes into that, equal rights and all
Correct.
of that stuff. But the messaging and the packaging of that messaging needs to, I think, attempt to meet in the middle, right? It can't just be, well, you're absolutely wrong for not acknowledging someone's pronouns or canceling someone because you misgendered them.
Correct.
Right? Like that, I think, is kind of going back to that, the extremism of political correctness that feeds into it. And what that does is it just lights a bigger fire under the MAGA base, because now they're going, well, look at this person that got canceled because they called that person that's clearly a man, they called him a man, but they should have called him a woman. And so right. I think they need to find a way to change that message in a way that allows, and some of this goes beyond just policymakers. I think this kind of goes from like a societal standpoint too. We need to find a way to where we can sit there and still respect somebody, but that was going to go both ways. Like if let's say I'm a MAGA Republican, right? I don't want to acknowledge your pronoun. You shouldn't necessarily cancel them for that. But as a MAGA Republican, I should not be not acknowledging your pronoun in a hateful way, right? I should not be doing it to be hateful. If I make a mistake, then that's one thing. But that also, if I have to accept you, you're going to have to accept, to an extent, I'm not saying in a hateful way, accept that in the inverse of that, maybe I don't necessarily believe that. And so that, I think, is more of what the left should be pushing for, rather than just like, let's immediately cancel people.
Right. The normal way a pronoun conversation should go, if you call somebody he,
yeah,
they should go, oh, actually it's she. It becomes a problem when you then, after you've been corrected, continue to say, what was my example? He.
Oh, yeah.
That's where it becomes disrespectful.
Oh,
you can complain
yeah.
all you want about, like, I don't agree with it. Like, I don't think that should be happening, whatever you want to believe. But that's like you calling somebody William and they go, oh, actually it's Bill. And then you go, well, sorry, I'm going to be calling you William. It's the same kind of, it's about respect.
100%. And I actually mentioned this. I can't remember if I mentioned it in a video or if I talked about it in the comment section of a video.
It all blurs together. Don't worry.
Yeah. And there was somebody that was talking about, like, how am I supposed to meet somebody in the middle that believes my daughter shouldn't be alive? And they were talking about someone that was transgender. And, I said, look, at the end of the day, there's going to just be some people you can't reason with.
Right.
But that can't be the default for every single conversation.
Right.
There are bad people out there. That's just a fact. They're on the left, they're on the right, they're in the middle. Not everybody is, perfect or even good. Some people, like I said, are just terrible people. And you're going to have your fair share of individuals that go, I don't care. I don't believe the same thing you believe. So you're Satan, and that's how it goes in a lot of cases. Like you don't believe the same thing I do. So therefore you're a religious enemy. And that drives a lot of the conversation. And so, I don't have all the answers. I'm not in politics. Right. But it's a tough situation to kind of navigate. I think the Democratic Party has kind of dropped the ball on that conversation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you never made it to the concrete MAGA side, but as you said at the top, you know a lot of Trump voters, MAGA
Yep.
people. If Democrats wanted to reach somebody who was starting to feel kind of disillusioned, I guess, with what is going on right now, before they are turning directly towards MAGA and getting right into it, what do you think Democrats could be doing differently to try and get those people on their side?
So I would say there's probably a couple different things. One, if Trump's economy implodes, I think there's going to be a bunch of people getting on the rafts and abandoning ship, because at the end of the day, money talks. And, if people are losing their jobs or things continue to get just drastically more expensive, he's going to be able to gaslight some of the people into believing that gas is under $2 or that your grocery prices are cheaper than ever. But at the end of the day, your pocketbook's going to make that decision for you, not Trump. So I think that would be one thing that if and when that starts to really affect people, Democrats can kind of take advantage of that conversation. The other thing, I'll use an example. So in my state of Kentucky, Andy Beshear is a liberal.
Oh, God love him.
He is a liberal Democrat in a dark red state. And he has now managed to win 2 terms, which is very surprising. But he has done that because his messaging is it's not to the extreme. It's kind of like what I was talking about. Like, he ran an entire campaign this last election cycle. He would even bring up the abortion issue, but he would never use the word abortion. And so,
interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And so, like, he would have a few campaign ads where they would talk about like women's rights and things like that, but they were very strategic to never use the term abortion. And as you can see, based on 2 election victories, he's managed to navigate that very well. And he continues to do that. And then he continues to do things like whenever there's a national disaster in the state, he's always able to get the funding to help rebuild things. He's always able to come in there and help and support people. He's on the ground going to those locations. Like, he really brings a human element to that office that, I think really helps him. And I get that that's easier at a state level than it is at a national level, but
Right.
like, he's very personable. He's someone that you just listen to him talk and you're like, man, that guy seems like he would understand, like I could sit there and tell him what's going on in my life and he'd be like, well, let's help you out, like,
Right.
So I think for Democrats as a whole, they need to look at his playbook and go, how did you win 2 elections in a deep red state and still have a favorability rating? And it's a lot of it is he doesn't use the divisive rhetoric, which is kind of what we touched on earlier. And he just comes across as very genuine, which I think you've got a lot of Democrats that Hillary Clinton did not come across as genuine, right? Like, Joe Biden did come across as genuine his first term. I think his second term, well, lack thereof, his second round of running, he was just way too old, right? He was too old the first time, but he was really too old the second time.
Right.
They need that genuine voice that comes into the stage. I worry with some of the names that have been floated for potential people running in 2028, but we'll see. You never know who kind of pops up out of nowhere.
Right. Well, it's interesting to me because right now I feel like there's 2 kind of schools of thoughts. There's about who should run on the Democrats for 2028. The first school of thought is that we need the whitest, most Southern homegrown man that has ever existed in the United States of America, and that would be somebody like Andy Bashir.
Yeah.
The other school of thought is that the pendulum has swung so freaking far right that it is going to come slamming back to the left, and we are going to get somebody that is genuinely a progressive leftist, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where I stand right now. Like you, I'm kind of waiting to like feel out kind of who's running,
early.
but I'm but
we're
you
like
can
what,
tell,
8 months in.
You can tell exactly who's trying to position themselves.
Yeah.
But you're right. Somebody could come slamming out of nowhere the way Obama did.
Yeah, I think, like, for example, someone like AOC.
I don't see her running in 2028, though.
I think she's laying the groundwork and seeing where things lay. I think so. Now, I think it's a terrible move for the Democratic Party.
I think she's got one shot at it. She's got one shot to, like, I don't think she's a candidate that could be like Joe Biden and run like five times for president until he finally gets it right. She's somebody that is going to need to run once, and if she doesn't win, she's going to have to pack it up. Like, sorry.
Yeah. So there's two reasons I think that she would not be able to win. One of them is unfortunate. The other one has been just the narrative. But the main reason I think is, at this point, for better or for worse, I'm not saying I agree with it, we've run 2 women on the Democratic Party, and they
not to be anti-woman.
No, absolutely.
But I agree.
Like I said, look, yes, I'm not anti-woman in this sense, but I'm just looking at the facts here. I don't think the country, for some reason, is ready for it yet. Maybe I'll be proven wrong by 2028, but I think that's already one slash against her. The second is, she has already, before she's ever even stepped on a presidential stage, been pigeonholed as this extreme socialist by the Republican Party. That narrative.
Well, now I think you're right, because she has been trying to better position herself as the, like, not socialist.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And so the second she makes that announcement, they will hammer that message harder than you've ever seen them hammer it before.
Right.
And that will scare so many people away. You're going to have a socialist woman, and that is not going to be the winning strategy. So
right.
I
also think a run by her, though, will depend on how good, if he wins, how good Zohran Mamdani does.
Yeah, I mean, if he comes into New York and just like really fixes things,
right? Well, that's what I mean. Like,
yeah, that could change the national conversation a bit. But I don't know if 4 years is enough time for that.
Correct, yes.
Because like it's going to take some time to, even if he's able to enact all the policies that he wanted to, you're going to have the initial year or two in which, no matter how successful they are, the Republican Party will talk about how big of a failure it is. Right. And then, it'll take a little bit of time. So I just don't think it's in the cards for her. Gavin Newsom, I think, has way too much baggage, even though he is trying. I mean, that man is trying so hard to position himself. And, on paper, you would sit there and go, well, he's got the charisma. He's got the good looks.
He's such a silver fox. Like,
right. Like
I would be charmed by his looks.
Right. He's that Kennedy-esque kind of guy, but then it's like, you look at California and how prices have gone through the roof, and just how that state has, the taxes are ridiculous and people are fleeing it. It's like that message will get hammered hard.
Right.
I watched him do that really random debate, him and Ron DeSantis.
I remember that. Yeah.
It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
Well, it's because they kept getting in Twitter fights. And so I can't remember who was the one that suggested it, but one of them was like, fine, then like meet me on the debate stage. And they did. Yeah, and I'm going to be honest, I think Gavin mopped the floor with Ron DeSantis. Like it was a good debate.
See, I think the opposite. I think.
Really?
Yes. It's been a while now, and I haven't really thought about it too hard.
We're going to have to go back and rewatch it.
I know. Yeah, we'll have to have a watch party or something. But like, I remember sitting there going, get Newsom off stage. The man is ruining his messaging. And it was because DeSantis he had the unique ability to sit there and go, well, in Florida, we don't have this tax and this tax and this tax. In California, you're taxing everyone, to oblivion, and people are fleeing your state, because that was at that time period where a lot of people were moving to Texas. But, and so DeSantis was able to really hit home on that kind of messaging. The homeless rate is through the roof over in California. Now, never mind the fact that it's like
Gavin Newsom hates homeless people. Like, let's there's two things Gavin Newsom hates, and it's Donald Trump and homeless people. Like, sorry.
That's something him and Trump have in common. Maybe they could grab a beer. Right. So I'd have to go back and rewatch it. But I remember coming away from that going, yikes. That was hard.
That's
if you're
so interesting. Because I remember watching it and being like, and maybe part of it was just because Ron DeSantis is, in my opinion, a bad debater. So that might have been part of it, where I was like, it just seems like he's kind of talking in circles, whereas Gavin has the talking points. But yeah, I would have to go back and rewatch that. I'll get back to you. I'll email you in a couple of days when I rewatch it.
Yeah, we can do a follow-up show if you want.
All right, let's move on to kind of future looking. We just talked about the 2028 election, but more future.
Yeah.
Do you think the Republican Party can move beyond MAGA, or is this it? Like, is this just its final form?
Yeah, I mean, I think at some point, if you just look throughout history, right? Like, both parties have evolved over time quite a bit. I mean, you look at the Republican Party back in the day would have been probably closer to the Democratic Party back, way back. And now, you've got the MAGA wing of whatever this is. But I think at some point, but I think it's potentially a generational change. If you think about just like how generations typically work, kids kind of go the opposite of what their parents were. And so you've got this whole MAGA movement right now, and you've got people growing up in this movement. And then by the time they get to be of age, I think you're going to see people rebelling against that. And so you could see a potentially completely different Republican Party than what you do now. I think it also kind of depends on that pendulum that we were talking about earlier. Like, how far left does it go when it does swing? And, that's one thing that I'm always like, guys, on the Republican Party, you guys need to understand everything you're cheering about now, you're opening the door for that to be absolutely hell for you, if it swings the other way, because the precedent that Trump is setting for literally everything is unheard of. And so I think at some point it can change, but it's going to potentially be 12 plus years from now before you finally see it fully kind of shifted.
Right. So do you agree or disagree that the Republican Party needs to be burnt down and built up on the bones of John McCain?
I would agree that whatever version of this needs to most definitely burnt down. I almost kind of struggle to call this a Republican Party.
I try to use the word MAGA.
I do
because
too.
I'm like, this is not the Republican Party that I recall as a child. Yep. And again, I was 16 when Donald Trump was elected the first time, but I do have very vivid memories of Obama's first election and like age. I remember when same-sex marriage was legalized. Like, there are some very key points that I remember from Obama's terms, but like I remember a normal Republican Party. Like, I remember watching those debates in 2008.
I remember
what happened.
The whole reason I started to love politics was the 2000 election between Gore and Bush. I found that so fascinating, how that went like a whole month past the election, and it's like, that was such a vastly different Republican Party. Like, did Bush have his warts? Absolutely. But did he at least have some respect for the office? I think so. I think he tried.
Yeah. And we look at those videos of him like dodging shoes and saying, watch this drive. And we're like, oh,
yeah.
God,
Yeah,
I missed that war criminal. Like, what?
Dude, I'm so glad someone else remembers to watch this drive. I brought that up at one point to somebody. It was on a Twitter space, and no one responded. Like, I was like, no one remembers that?
It's one of my favorite videos. And, like, also Will Ferrell playing him on
so
SNL.
fun.
Like, those,
Yes.
I always love the political SNL bits. Like,
yes.
And again, when Bush v. Gore, I was approximately 1 year old.
Oh, wow.
But however, when I started to get into politics and learn about the significant moments in our elections, I think I was in 8th grade when we learned about Bush v. Gore in like U.S. history or whatever. And I immediately got home and went on the Wikipedia machine and was like, let me read everything about this, because I thought it was the craziest thing. Like, I should have known in that moment.
Yeah, it was so wild, and just that's what really fascinated me about politics was that period, that like couple months, and I was like, I'm hooked. This is amazing. And then you get 9/11 a few months later, and it was like watching this guy that barely won the election now have to take on the biggest event in American history since probably the Civil War, like on
right.
American land. And so that was it was a really weird time to be like 12 years old, like, and into politics.
Right. So where do you see opportunity for common ground between people who reject Trumpism, whether they're on the left or right?
Yeah. So this is where it gets tough, because my token response is people have to just have like a conversation and be respectful, right? I think a lot can happen if you can just have a respectful conversation.
Right.
Unfortunately, I don't think that's capable of happening for a lot of people these days. I've kind of used the analogy that, like, if two people are constantly like a mile apart shouting at each other, there's no way that you can pull somebody to your side, because you're just too far apart. If you can get together and you can get close enough to shake somebody's hand, then you have the potential to be able to pull them over to your side. And if you're that close, you can shake their hand, then you're not having to necessarily shout. You can have just a conversation. And if you can get to that point where you can have a conversation and not just constantly just bash each other, then I think there's that opportunity for common ground. Because I think at a lot of times, at least in my experience, you can get to the point where either side goes, okay, I get that. I see that. And you get just a little bit closer and a little bit closer. And, you may not solve all the world's issues, but you might find an issue that you thought you were way apart on. And then you start to see both sides and go, okay, I get that. And maybe I'm not as far to the left or far to the right as I thought I was on that situation. I can understand the human element of this situation, or the economic element and things like that. So, I know it sounds so cliche, but
it's not. So many, almost every guest that comes on this podcast says that. And I think it is so true. Like, it's humanizing. Like, you have to humanize the problem. And I am somebody that believes that I can have relationships with Republicans, not MAGAs, with Republicans. In my head, in my mind, there is a very clear difference. The old guard of Republicans does not exist in Congress, but they very much exist in our communities.
Yeah.
And it's important to talk to them and remember what that old guard of Republicans looked like to keep it alive.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be great if they were able to kind of band together and maybe get a few election wins and push back against MAGA a bit. But it's too much of a machine at this point, the MAGA machine. And if you get in front of it, you're getting run over.
Right. So one last question. Mm-hmm. What do you want listeners, especially those that do not identify as Republican or MAGA, to understand about conservatives, especially those that never bought into Trump?
Well, we're not all racist. We're not all. That's the biggest one I get quite a bit. Is all Republicans are racist? They're not. At the end of the day, there are Republicans that, there might be differing policy views, but they really do want what's best for the country and for everyday people. And, you know, even when you look at like the social welfare programs, like they may not agree with all the spending, but they still want to see those people be helped. Now, they have different ideas and ways that they want to do that, but they're still compassionate. And I think that gets lost in today's Republican Party. There's not a lot of compassion unless you look like me. I mean, let's be honest. And so it's just something that I think people do kind of need to be aware of. We kind of touched on it. MAGA and Republicans aren't necessarily the same. And I try to be very mindful of the words. I don't typically use Republicans in my videos. I use MAGA because it is a whole different sect of the party. And, you know, traditional Republicans might be a minority, but they're still there. And, you know, they're just as compassionate, I think, as Democrats in a lot of cases. They just have a different worldview on how to get there. And it may not be right, it may not be wrong, you know, but there's the compassion still there. So I think that's kind of what viewers need to realize is not all Republicans are racist and hate everyone.
Right. Well, growing up, my father was a Republican. My mom was an independent, but leaned left. And my dad was more of like a libertarian, like pro-guns, pro-abortion, pro-gay marriage, all under the umbrella that the government shouldn't tell you what to do. And he's very quickly slipped into MAGA world, way too deep. But my mom will always say, like, when we started dating and got married, they're now divorced, by the way. So we're good. We're good on that front.
2016?
But my mom...
No.
No, well... It kind of was, though, because...
Okay. Didn't mean to bring up old family trauma. Well, sorry.
2020, he, like, really started to make, like, the conspiracy theorist turn. And it, like, kind of coincided with the start of their divorce, but, like, whatever. But my mom will always say, when they first started dating, their differences were about, like, how much money should the education department get? Like, how much money should food stamps get? Like, they didn't disagree on concrete human rights and
that used to be the old those were the debates, you know, those were the debates of old, you know, like that's wild, but that is not the debates anymore. It's whether or not the Department of Education should exist.
Right. Exactly. All right, well, that is all I have for you. Do you feel like I missed anything?
No, I don't think so. It was a great conversation.
I know. I'm so happy you came on. I like I said, I love having conservatives, ex-conservatives, you know, the old guard. I love having them on because I think it's very important that people see that people like you still exist and, you know, hope is out there for the Republican Party to maybe become anew.
Fingers crossed, hopefully. We'll see.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode of Current Affairs Unfiltered. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Hot Takes as much as I did. He's very well versed on the history of the Republican Party and especially, you know, the old guard, the way things used to be that I think I miss personally. I think a lot of people miss that kind of normalcy where everybody thought that the craziest thing that could happen was Dick Cheney being vice president. Like our fears seemed so small to what they are right now. And I also, like we talked about, I would like to watch the Newsom and DeSantis debate with him. I'm keeping that one on the back burner for when I'm lost on a guest episode. I'd love to go back and rewatch that. But if you do want to follow Hot Takes, I will have his social media linked in the show notes, and he does post some good content. It does get some laughs out of me, I can't lie. But if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to follow, leave a review, or share it with someone who could use this information. And as always, if you have questions, topic suggestions, or just want to say hi, you can find me on social media at Current Affairs Unfiltered Pod on Instagram, or send me an email at currentaffairs.unfilteredpod@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Keep asking questions, stay engaged, and remember that there are Republicans out there who also think that this Republican Party is crazy. I'll see you guys next week.